Alright, this is Michael. Welcome back to the Learning to Program using the Godot game programming engine. Alright, so today we're going to start on this new game called CircleTap. And this is it playing right here, and all you do is you click on the targets when they pop up, and you hear a little sound, you get a score goes up, and you see a little particle system. So we're going to learn about a lot of new things here, and this is what we're going to make. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to exit out of that one. I'm going to load up Godot, and we're going to create a new project. I'm going to call it class CircleTap, create my folder, and create and edit. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create some folders to organize my assets that we're going to bring in. So I'm going to create an art folder. I'm going to create a sounds folder. Let's just call it sound. And one more for fonts. There we go. And then I've got a little directory here, and these are the files that we're going to use. So this is a little popping sound, and we're going to use this font file here that's got some nice game font files. This is a little particle that I just drew in Paint, and then here's a target. The target and the font came from Kenny's free assets, and you can find those on the internet, and this came from freesounds.org. So those are some good resources for finding game assets. So what I'm going to do here is I'm in Godot. You can either drag them in directly like this. So I'm going to grab my particle, and I'm going to grab my particle and drag it right into art right there. Well, right into art, and there it is. If I'd been in the directory, it would have worked better, so I could have done that. And or you can also show in File Manager, and then just copy them in here. So I want my sound file in here, copy. I want my font file in here. Now font files don't seem to drag into here very well, so you need to use this method to get them in there. But once they're in there, you can now my font didn't seem to go. Let me try that again. So I'm going to show in File Manager and Assets, and I'm going to copy. Oh, I see what I did. I just made a link. Alright, let's go to Godot. There it is. Alright, so now he's in there. So let's set up our scene. So I'm going to change this resolution. So this is currently set for standard, computer monitor resolution, and we're going to set this up for a mobile device. So I'm going to go up here to Project, and then Project Settings. I'm going to scroll all the way down here to Display, and then I'm going to click on this window. And here I can set my window size. So I'm going to use a high def resolution that's in a normal aspect ratio, which that just means like the height and width, or the shape of a phone. So we're going to use let's see, 480 by 853. So I just got these off the internet as standard high definition resolution right there. We're going to leave the rest of this alone, and we're going to change this, the orientation for handheld, we're going to change that to portrait, so that just means up and down instead of side to side. And then we're going to leave these guys alone, and then on the stretch mode we're going to change this to 2D, and we'll just use keep width. So either one of these would work, they would just scale differently. And we'll see why this is important, because if I had a phone that wasn't exactly that resolution, can't save quite yet. If I had a phone that wasn't quite that resolution, my game might just be a little box up at the corner of my screen instead of filling up my screen. That's what the scaling means. Alright, so I'm going to create an empty scene here to start it off. So I'm going to go ahead and create a blank regular node, and I'm going to name that main. And then I'm going to create a, let's see, what else do I need? Oh, let's create a label, and we're going to put that at the top for the score. And you can put the label directly. We'll just do that. And we're going to scoot that in the middle. The text, I'm just going to use, I'm going to say score 0, that way I can have a kind of a preview of what it's going to look like when I get playing. But we're going to set that from code as well. So here I'm going to scroll down in my properties of my label to this custom fonts, and right here I'm going to click on this button, and I'm going to say new dynamic font. Now that set it to a dynamic font, but it's not set. This is not set up yet, so I need to click it again, and that actually drills in to allow me to set up the font. So I'm going to drop down this font, and then right here I have font data. I'm going to go over here to my font that I downloaded from Kenny. I'm going to drag that over and drop it right there. And then under settings, I'm going to change my size from 0. Let's change it up to something bigger like 32. Okay, that's pretty good. Actually, I like that. It's nice and big, and I can see it. I'm going to kind of recenter that, and I'm going to jump back out of here. These buttons navigate to allow you, so when I drilled into my dynamic font, if I want to go back up to the label, I can use this little arrow right there. That'll take me back up to the label. If you like, you can actually set up the alignment so that it centers the text even when it grows, but we'll just leave it like this for now. It's fine. Alright, so I'm going to save this scene. I'm just going to save with the default name, and let's run this. Select main scene default. Good. So there's my game, and you can see the black part is the part, the gray is my game, and the black part is the part that is not part of my game that's scaling. So this kind of can simulate if I had a different shape phone. So if I had a real square looking phone, my game might look like this, and if I had a real tall skinny phone, it might look like that. But you notice, as if I had a small phone, it would look like that, and if I had a really large phone, it would look like that. So this will tell us what it'll look like on different types of phones, and this looks pretty good. So we've got our score, we've got our background scene. Let's set up our target. So the target scene, we're going to use a separate scene. We've not done this before, so I can create a new scene by either clicking here, or I can come over here to scene and say new scene. But I'm just going to use this button right here. So I've created a new scene. So you notice over here my scene tree is now empty again, and this is going to be my target scene. Alright, so let's use the plus sign, and this time instead of a blank node, I'm going to use an area 2D. So an area 2D is part of Godot's physics engine. So this is our first dabbling into the physics engine, and all we're going to use this for is for checking to see where the player touches on the screen. So areas are used for all sorts of things, like what you're going to use it for touching, tap or click events. They're also used for if two objects, or if an object like the player comes into an area, this would be what you would use to detect that. So what we're going to do here is you'll notice there's this yellow triangle right here, and it says the node has no children shapes, so it can't interact with that space. So it says consider adding a collision shape 2D. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to create a collision shape 2D. And now this thing has a warning, and its warning says a shape must be provided for this node to function. And it says please create a shape resource for it. So if I come down here into the inspector, I have this shape property, and I have a drop down to create a resource. And so I have all these different types of shapes to pick from. Now we're going to use a circle shape, but first let's add our sprite image, or our target image, so that we know what the shape is that we're going to try and match to. So to do that, I'm going to add to my area up here, I'm going to add a child node, and I'm going to add a sprite. And a sprite is a picture in 2D. So I can assign this sprite. Down here you notice it has this texture property. That's going to be the picture. So I'm going to come over here to my art, and I'm going to get my target, and I'm going to drag it right there on texture. Alright, so now I've set up my texture, and you can see my picture right there that I loaded in. That's assigned to the sprite. So now I'm going to pick this collision shape, and I'm going to pick shape circle, and let's reorder these so that I can see this. So you notice here I have this like blue kind of shaded area. That's my collision shape. So if I ran it just like this, you would have to tap right here in order for it to work. So what we want to do is expand this. Now I can expand using these, and that'll deform my collision area, but I don't want to do that because that can cause all kinds of strange issues. What you want to do is grab this inside handle, and that will expand it nicely. And depending on the type of collision shape you have, you may have different handles. So I'm going to clear this real quick, and we're going to create a box rectangle. See, now a rectangle has two. I can drag it this way and that way. Let's go back though and create our circle again, and we'll resize it back up properly. And it doesn't have to match perfect, but get it as close as you can. Alright, so one last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this from Area 2D to Target. That'll make my scripts nice and make sense. And when I save, my default name will be Target, which is what I want. Now I need to do a couple more small things to this before I stop. And the first thing I need to do is I want this target to go away. So if I spawn this on my main scene, it would never go away. It would stay until the player tapped it or I closed the game. So what I want this to do is I want it to go away after a time. And to do that, we're going to use what's called a timer. And Godot has a timer node for just this type of thing. So I'm going to call this timer lifespan, because that's how long this target node is going to live. And then down here in the inspector, I've got a couple of settings I want to set. So I've got the wait time, and this is how long until this timer expires, and that's when we'll delete this target. So I'm gonna make that actually smaller. So this is in seconds, so I'm gonna wait 0.8 seconds. That gives the player just a little bit of time to get their finger over on top of the target and tap it before that 0.8 seconds is up. One shot means it'll run once and then it won't trigger again. So I want that because I don't want this to trigger twice on me. Probably wouldn't matter in this case since we're going to be deleting this object anyways. It wouldn't have a chance to fire again, but that's what that property does. And auto start we do want. What that means is as soon as we create this object, that timer will start and we'll have 0.8 seconds before it triggers. Otherwise I would have to manually start it using a script. Alright, so this is set. The one last thing I need to do is I need to attach my event of the timeout here, this timer timeout. I need to attach that to a script, and to do that I'm going to create a script right here on my target node by clicking my script button, and I'll just leave the defaults, and I'm just going to clear all this out. Alright, so I'm going to go back to my target, and I'm going to attach that timeout function, and I'm going to just attach it up here to my target script that I just created, leave the default name, and hit connect. Alright, so this function should run when my timer expires after the 0.8 seconds, and I'm going to use a command called queue free. And this isn't really a concept you need to worry about, but what this does is it just deletes this game object. And so in this case it's this target, this is where the script is running, so this is the object that will be deleted. So this whole target will just go away because of this command. So it's kind of like a delete function, and that's what that does. Alright, so if I put one of these on my scene right now, and you can do that a couple ways. I can click up here. Oops, sorry. I can click this yeah, I can click this one, the little link, and I can put a target. There's my target. I can also come over here and just drag in the target, right? And yeah, so those are the various ways I can bring in a scene that I've built, and I can bring it into another scene. So you can cascade and nest these and create really complicated effects doing that. So in this case, I've just got my main scene with one target. Let's run this, and what I expect to see is I see it there for a second and then it disappears after that 0.8 seconds. So that's perfect. But now we don't want this to be here to start because we don't need it there right at the beginning. We want it to appear after 3 seconds. And to do that, I'm going to create a script on here because I'm going to need that eventually anyways. I'm just going to leave the defaults, and we'll just delete the default contents. And I need another timer here, and this is going to be my spawner timer. So I'm going to create another timer, and this one I'm going to call spawner. Now the settings on this is going to be just slightly different. Instead of every 0.8 seconds, let's use 2 seconds. So that's pretty frequent, but it's not. It's got a nice little delay to it, and with the 0.8 seconds, that'll leave 1.2 seconds, excuse me, of time between targets. All right, so I do not want this to be one shot. I want it to keep running on even after the first one is spawned. However, I do want it to auto start, so I'm going to leave that on. And I need to attach the timeout just like I did on the other one, and this one's going to go to the main scene. And let's hit connect. All right. So let's right. So right here, let's just to prove that this is working, let's do a print statement, and we'll say target spawned, right? And we'll close our parentheses, and we'll play this, and I should see every 2 seconds down here in my output window, I'll see target spawned. Now my target's not actually spawning yet, because that's what we're about to write the logic for. So I'm going to create two variables, and this is going to be my x and y. So I'm going to say var x equals 0, var y equals 0. And we're going to change this in just a second, but for now let's talk about what that means. So back on my main scene, in 2 dimensions they're named. So I have x and I have y. So x is left to right and y is up and down, and x grows in this direction to the right, and it goes down in this direction. And this point right here where these 2 lines intersect right there, this is 0, 0. So over here this would be, negative x, and this would be positive x, and this would be now y is a little strange. It actually grows going down, and it is lower going up. So up here is negative y, and up here is positive y. And if you look over here on the side, you can actually see numbers, little numbers. They're very tiny, but they tell you what the exact position is. So if I said this is about x 160 right here, and this is about 240 right here, so this point right here is about x 160 and y 240. And then up here, this is about negative 80, negative 80. Alright? So, and you can check that by, let's drag into target. And so the very tiny center of that is where that point is. So I'm going to put that about at 240 by 160. Now if I come over here to the inspector and I check the transform position, here's my x, which I said was about 160, and it's 167, and my y, which I said was 240, is 245. So I was pretty close there. And you can see as I move this, these position numbers change as well. Alright, so let's delete that and we'll get back to this. So in my script, I created an X and Y, and now I'm going to spawn in the object at that position. So in order to spawn an object, I need to do a couple things. First, I need to load an instance of that scene. So it needs to know what scene to create or to spawn. And the way I do that is I can point to it with a variable. So I'm going to say target scene. So I'm going to name it. I'm going to assign it the preload. So this is a special function designed for loading resources. And so I'm just going to drop down here and pick target.tscene. So this res colon / that just stands for resource. So it's right here as well. So you can see it right there. And so if I'm right here, if I needed to load a resource from the art folder, I would, but I'm not. I saved my target right here in the root. So I just need resource colon / target tscene, just like that. So this preload will load that resource into this target scene variable. So now in order to create an instance of that, I'm going to say new target, var new target. So I'm going to put this into a new variable, and I'm going to say target scene, and I'm going to access a property of that called instance. Alright, so this will take this target scene and create a new instance of it and put it here in this new target variable. Now I can set the position of that by saying new target.position, just like that. And a position, we talked about X and Y, but we didn't talk about how we store an X and Y. So I can store them separately, just like I did here in my script as var X and var Y. But Godot has a convenience object called a vector2, which stands for vector 2D. There's also a vector 3 that has 3 parameters, an X, Y, and Z, and that's how I define a point in 3D space. But we're just in 2D space, so all I have is X and Y. So I have X, which I'll just put my X from up here, and Y, which I'll put my Y from right here. Now you may think this is silly, but what we're about to do is we're going to randomize our position, our starting position, and so I need some space to write some code here. Alright, so I'm going to assign that to my position, and then I need to add this to my scene. So if I ran this right now, I'm creating this object, but nothing's actually going to be displayed because my target's just off in memory somewhere and it's not actually being put onto the scene. So let's do that real quick. So I'm going to say add child, and all I'm going to say is new target. And what that will do is, since this script is running on this main object, it will add a new child object here, which is of this target scene. So let's run this. We'll see what happens. And there it is. They're appearing, and they're appearing up here at 0, 0, which is the top right corner of my scene. Also, if you drop this down, this is the live scene view of my game as it's running. So if I open this at the same time, you can see when my target appears, it also appears over here in my scene view. So this is where I'm adding that child, and it's being added in. And it's just like if I had right-clicked and said add node, it's being added using this add child function. Alright, very good. So I think we see how this is working and how this is being instanced into the scene and being added. Now let's talk about how we can randomize this. So the first thing we need to do is remember in our ready function before, we used something called randomize. We use that in our guess my number project, and I need to do it here so that my object appears in different places. But I'm going to use a different function here called rand range. What that means is I have a starting number and an ending number, so a from and a to, and these will be the range that I want my number to be generated in. So I can make it from 0, and then if I look at my scene here, I can go from 0 to 480 right here. Right? And then for my Y, I can go from 0 all the way down here to what was it, 850-ish. So rand range 0 to 850. Alright, so if I play this, hopefully my target won't appear just right here. You notice it's appearing randomly throughout my scene. That's great. But if I let this run long enough, this target would eventually be able to, yep, there, it just printed, or placed it right here, and it was actually hanging off the screen a little bit. I don't like that. What I'd really like to do is make sure it always appears somewhere in the center here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a buffer to these. So what I can do is add a variable, and I'm going to call it space, or spacer. Alright? And let's just say I'm going to use about 50 units. So if I jump back here and I zoom in, so this is kind of the size of my whole screen. 50 would be about, right here. So it's not going to get any closer than that from the side. And I want this on the top, the sides, and the bottom. So what I can do here is, instead of 0, I can just use spacer. So now this number would be 50. And then I can take this 480 and I can subtract spacer, just like that. Alright? So if I let this run, hopefully I shouldn't have any appear off the screen now. And they should be more in the center here. I can have a little bit up there. Yeah, that one came pretty close, but it wasn't off the screen. You could add a little bit more on the top if you like, by increasing this rand range, this first one right here. You could add a little bit to that if you'd like, to keep it from overlapping on your score printout. But there's one more thing I can do here. Instead of 480 right here, I can actually use a helper function here. If I look in the search, I can say get viewport. So there's a method called get viewport, and it returns the node's viewport. So I'm going to click that. And then viewport has a size. And I'm going to click that. Remember, our vector 2s have an X and Y component. So if I go back to my script for my main, here instead of 840, what I can do is say get viewport, and then I can say size.x. And so that'll be the width of my viewport. And here I can say get viewport size.y, and that'll be the height of my viewport. So now I don't have to remember those numbers, and if I changed it in my project settings, if I changed it in the future, my code wouldn't need to change. The same code would work just fine. Alright, so I'm going to remove this by just commenting it out, so I can put it back in if I need it, and my game is partially functioning. Alright, so this is part 1, and in part 2 we're going to add the event so I can click it, and we're going to create the particle effect and add the sound. Alright, see you in a minute.